Picture this. I'm cold and I'm standing in front of the wood stove. Now, there's a sequence of events that I need to go through in order to stoke the stove. So the step one is to open the levers. Step two is to put gloves on. Step three is to open the stove door. Step four is to push the coals into the center. Step five is to stoke it by putting the wood in. And then I have to close the door, but not fully because I want the air to circulate to get it started. Once the fire's lit, probably 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. Once that's done, then I close the door. And then about 5 minutes later or 3 minutes later, I close the levers. Now that's the sequence of events that I need to do in order to stoke the stove, and then I can get warmed up. So basically it would take probably at the very most 5 minutes, 30 seconds, because I do it all the time. But I did have to learn that sequence. Some of it you have to do, and some of it is something that I've figured out along the way. So picture this now. I'm standing in front of the stove. I'm cold. I want to stoke the stove. But I have to think through every step of the way. So step one is to open the levers. I'm standing in front of the stove and I have to figure out which lever I want to open first. I suppose I could open both levers at the same time using both hands. However, one lever you lift, the other one you push away. So I'm standing at the stove. I see that these levers, both of them, are on the right-hand side. So I choose to use my right hand because that's part of the step, is to figure out which hand I need to use. Now I have to lean over, reach, and push the lever up. Well, I see that the other lever is below that, and so I just need to lean over a little more, but this time I have to push the lever away from me. It does something completely different. And then I stand up again. Well, the next step is I really should put gloves on. This is not a requirement at this point in time, but it's something that makes sense to do at this point. But what hand do I put in first? Which hand do I put the glove on first? Well, I look down below and on the ground are the gloves. The left glove is on top of the right glove. So it makes sense for me to choose to put the glove on my left hand. Well, that means I need to use my right hand to pick up the glove. So I bend over and I pick up the glove with my right hand and I begin to put it on my left hand, but I have to find the opening first. So I find the opening and then I start to put my hand in. But as I'm putting my hand in, I have to make sure that my fingers and my thumb are going into the correct place as I use my other hand to pull the glove on. Well, then I have to do the same thing, that thought process all over again to put the glove on my right hand. I have to pick it up with my left, etc. Now, once I've got the gloves on, now it's time to open the stove. Well, I'm standing in front of the stove. I'm still cold. I've got gloves on now, though. And there are coals in there that are starting to warm up, but that's beside the point. So I have to figure out how to open the door. Well, the lever or the lever on the door goes from right to left to down below. So it goes in a circular motion to my left. So it makes sense for me to use my left hand to open the door. But then I have to, that just opens the lever, the latch. Now I have to open the door, and the door, thankfully, opens from right to left. So I can use my left hand that's still on that lever, and I can pull open the door. Well, if I have to think through that whole entire process and then all the rest of the process, it's going to take me at least the very minimum twice what it would take me to do what I do by habit. So, I mean, this is only the beginning of what I have to do. And already, how long have I spoken for? Anyway, you can see that it would take an inordinate length of time every single day if I had to choose the steps over and over and over again as if it was brand new. So instead of taking 5 minutes and 20 seconds, it takes me well over 10 minutes just to put, just to put wood on the wood stove. And if I have to do that every single day, and I have to do that 2 or 3 times a day, that adds up to a heck of a lot of time. And it would be exhausting just to do those things over and over and over again. It would be exhausting mentally because that takes a lot of thought and a lot of figuring out and what to do. So habits are incredibly valuable to us as human beings. Hi, I'm Heather O'Reilly, founder of Lynne Coaching. I have been mentoring, coaching, and facilitating small groups for well over 30 years. I help empower women and men to become their authentic selves with confidence and kindness. So as we can see by the example I used of the wood stove, that there are advantages to having sequences in your lives that are already something that you know how to do. Like, for example, putting on the gloves. I mean, it doesn't matter what style the gloves are. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what texture they are. We just know that the process is this way, and it happens because we know what to do. It's a habit. So the sequence is the same. The cue is the same because, I need to put a glove on. It's all the same. And so it just becomes habit. It becomes rote. So studies estimate that habits comprise over 40% of our behaviors. That is a large chunk of our lifetime. It's almost half of the behaviors of our lifetime. So habits are a major part of our lives in many ways. So then what is a habit? So I'm going to read this. It says, a habit is behaviors that we perform on a daily or otherwise regular basis, which become virtually automatic. So habits are helpful in everyday life, leaving our brains to do those thinking things that we need to do. Can you imagine how fried our brains would be if we had to think through everything and then on top of that have all those things we need to actually spend time thinking about? So habits have 3 components to them. So the first one is there's an environmental cue. From that environmental cue, we have a behavioral response. And from that behavioral response, we receive a reward, or at least the removal of an unpleasant stimulus. The more often these 3 occur in time proximity. So the more often they happen close together, but also time-wise, like one right after the other, the stronger that bond between them all becomes. And if so, that behavioral repetition, we have to understand, creates neural pathways in our brain. Excuse me. And that gets stronger the more the repetitions. So the more, so say for instance, for brushing our teeth, for a really good example, when we first begin to brush our teeth, like we have to learn how to do it, we have to learn the process. And then we're supposed to do it twice a day. So, okay. But what is it that cues us in to brushing our teeth? Well, it could be knowing that we have to go to work. It could be knowing that we need to go to bed. It's part of our routine to go to bed. So there's a kind of cue that says it's time to brush your teeth. So that's your environmental cue. Your behavior is all that sequence, that little habit that you have of brushing your teeth, going through that sequence of brushing your teeth. And you get a reward from that. The reward is that your mouth feels nice and clean. You don't have bad breath anymore. And so things are great. So you know that when you go to work, you'll be fine. You've gotten rid of all that crunchy stuff that you've just eaten. And so you've got this great reward. So the next time you do it, especially if you do it in the same sequence, which is, picking up your toothbrush, getting it wet, putting on some toothpaste, brushing your teeth. The more you do that, and the more often you keep those things together. So instead of picking up your toothbrush, putting it down, picking up the toothpaste, opening it up, putting it down, picking up, if you just pick up and do what you need to do, and you do that over time, then that time proximity makes that line or that sequence stronger. It makes the neural pathway stronger. But eventually, it doesn't matter anymore about that great tingly feeling in your mouth anymore from that mint toothpaste. It's just something that you do. That motivation that you used to have just kind of goes away. It doesn't matter anymore, but it's something that you just do. So it's a habit, right? Many habits are formed in childhood from the responses that were taught by our parents or other authorities like teachers or our peers or societal norms. All those things contribute to the habits that we have presently. Our experiences with those is what contributes to our habits presently. Now, they help us to fit in. They help us to be accepted, to make other people's lives easier and make our own lives easier. But sometimes these old habits that we've learned just aren't of much use anymore in our adulthood. So these particular ones that aren't helpful anymore, maybe they just have to be changed, or they need to be removed altogether, and maybe new habits need to be formed. So actually at this point, I think I should explain the difference between addictions and habits, because they're very, very similar in their components. However, addictions have an additional component, which is danger, harm. Habits tend to be non-harmful. They tend to be helpful. And we have kind of control over that to some degree. However, with addictions, we don't have the same kind of control because there's more at play than just neural pathways. So, but that's for another time. That's not something that we should discuss here at this particular moment with this purpose that we have here. Authenticity, by my definition, needs to have a foundation of values and beliefs. Now, without concrete values and beliefs, we can easily be swayed, kind of like blown by the wind, depending on circumstances or who happens to be in the room or our fears. They all sway us in different ways. And so, uh, any number of influences can cause us to have these habits and can help us create these habits. So taking the time to actually determine what you truly value and what you truly believe based on truth, that's very important, that is, be based on truth. Taking the time to determine those things uh, will actually profoundly affect your confidence and your comportment. So integrity is a byproduct and happiness is a byproduct. Let me see, just living your true self in most situations and circumstances, that consistency is something else that comes along with having those solid values and beliefs. Your fear and anxiety is diminished and life becomes less of a burden and more of a joy. So then, what do habits have to do with values and beliefs? What do they have to do with authenticity? Well, if we're unsure of our values and what we actually believe, then we tend to accept other people's values and beliefs, whether it's a truth or whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. We tend towards kind of whoever's in the room or whoever's more important to us as far as mentorship or parental control or authority. And when we're faced with various situations, we actually don't know how to respond appropriately. We actually respond, and in actual fact, we react on an emotional level. And that's not always the best method, because depending on how you're feeling that day, you could be angry and pound the table, or you could, okay, like, it's all right, just kind of, back away. That's not necessarily the most appropriate response, but habitually, we may fall into those categories as well. But when we take on other people's beliefs and stuff, we don't have that depth of belief. We don't have that depth of so that when something happens, we feel very strongly about it, and we can be confident in the way we feel about it and what we're thinking about it and what we believe about it. And then we respond according to that. So values and beliefs are hugely important. Now, we can be unstable and kind of wishy-washy in the way we conduct ourselves because of that, not having our own values and beliefs. And as I said, sometimes that's just not the right response. So, but then on the other hand, sometimes we just use old habits to respond. So a different stimulus, but it's a habit that we respond in to something that may be similar to a stimulus that we've received before, that we have used this habit over and over again on. So we just don't seem to have much control over our responses. Now, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Well, actually, studies show that if a dog is willing to learn something new, then age only causes the length of time it takes for the dog to learn. It increases according to age. Now, that's presuming that there's no cognitive issues or physical issues that's going to interfere with that. So, when we have determined what we truly value, what we truly, truly believe, then we need to bring our habits into alignment with that determination. And that means change. Now, we desire change. The paradox is we don't like change. We desire to change, but we resist change. And yet we reject change. But realizing that all these habits are learned, we also know then that these things can be unlearned and that new learning can take place. And the way that happens is we form new neural pathways. So let's take a farmer, for example. He gets up every day. He goes out into the barnyard and he picks up a bale of hay, puts it on the tractor. Well, the tractor picks up the bale of hay because the bale's pretty big and heavy. And then he takes it out to the field where the animals are. So he does this every single day, and he takes it out to the same place every single day. So what happens is the tractor starts causing ruts because it's going down the same pathway every single day, neural pathways. So it's creating ruts. And after a while, all he has to do is point the tractor in the right direction and press on the accelerator, and it'll just stay in the ruts and take it right out to where it needs to go. Habits. Fantastic, right? But he needs to move the animals. So he moves them to another field. So he gets up the next day and he gets the bale on the back of the tractor, and he goes to take the bale out to the field. But he realizes that he can't go that same way. He has to go a different way. So what he does is he gets the tractor going, but he turns and holds the steering wheel a quarter turn. Now, at first, it's hard. He's hanging on and he hangs on, but eventually what happens is the tractor gets out of that rut and then travels down to the other field. Now, by the same time that he would spend going out to the one field, he would spend going out to the other field. But you know what? By the time he looks back to see where he used to take it, he can't even see it anymore. It's not even in sight. He's gone so far by just a quarter turn. And the other thing to realize too is, we're worried about these neural pathways that are already there. Well, just like the ruts, if they're not being used, eventually the wind and the rain and everything will kind of mush them all up, and they'll level out and they'll just not be used anymore. Now, there may be new ruts out to this new field, and that's a good thing again, because that's where it needs to go. That's the new habit. That's the right place for him. That's the goal he's trying to reach. And that's a good thing. So over time, these previous ruts, which disappear, are much like the neural pathways in our brain. They really, I'm not going to say decompose, but they kind of wither away. They just not get used anymore. They're just cut off. So now we have a new habit formed, and it's the right one, and it's good, and it supports the farmer's desire to and knowledge and belief that his cows are in that field and that he needs to feed them, and off he goes. So it's all good. It's all good. So I want to bust a myth. You've probably heard that it takes 21 days to create a habit. Well, like I said, that's a myth. It has been discovered that because there are so many factors involved in habit change, that it actually, studies are saying that it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days to create and to solidify a habit. Now, what are the factors? Well, how strong is the habit? What is the habit tied to? What's the environment like? Can you change your environment? That's a really big thing when you're trying to change a habit, is because your habit is involved with environmental cues. It's important to change your environment to change your habit. Oh, you know, what kind of a support system do you actually have? Do you even have a support system? So, and how valuable is this new habit? These are just some of the reasons. But what we've found, what studies have showed, is that the tiniest change in a habit can create a momentous, an incredible change over time. Persistence and consistency of that small change compounds. Now, you don't see much of things going on in the beginning. You don't see much change, much like that, the farmer who's holding this. Well, the ruts being pushed, right? But you don't see that much. But once he gets over that, suddenly he's free, and he goes. So that, but it takes time. He's holding on tight. So persistence and consistency of that small change just compounds and creates the success you want. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, like that farmer hanging on for the start. But the more repetition, and this is something we used to do in school, and I gather we don't do that anymore. Like, I think of the times tables. We would repeat the timetables over and over and over. We would learn to spell. We would repeat those over and over and over again. And we were really good at spelling. We were really good at mathematics, certain mathematics, and 1 and 1 equals 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 times 1 equals 1. These things, we knew really quickly. They were ingrained in our heads. So this repetition, consistent repetition, is going to create what you desire. You will fail, and that's okay. Failure is an opportunity to learn what you may have done wrong, and so you have the opportunity to figuring out a better way of doing something. Failure is never a bad thing. If you think in terms of the number of really successful people in this world, they have failed far more times than they have succeeded. But each time they fail, they learn something from it and fix something, whatever it may be. And it gets better and better and better as time goes on. So failure should never, ever be something that you look upon as something as horrible and negative and causing you to make yourself, to tell yourself you're useless and all that kind of stuff. No, failure is a good thing. Think of a child who's learning to walk. What do? They fail, they fall. They get back up again, and they fall, and they get back up, and they fall. Eventually, they don't fall. Then they start running, and what happens? They hit things, and they fall, and they start again. Do we look at children who aren't managing to walk right away? Do we look at them and say, oh, that's just awful? they've failed and that's the end of it all. No, we encourage them to try again. And that's what you should be doing with yourself. And that's what's so important about a support system. Small steps, too, are much easier to deal with. You try and roll a great big rock. You have to do a lot of effort in order to roll that big rock. But take a little stone, you just roll it out of the way. It's not a big deal. So small change is much easier to deal with than a large issue, a large change. But then you say, yeah, but then it's going to take longer because then I've got all these small changes to try and figure out. Well, okay, maybe, but let's look at it this way. If you take a small step and you do it for a certain period of time, say, I'm going to say 12 weeks because anywhere from 9 to 12 weeks is usually where you can build a habit. But 12 weeks is handy because it's a quarter of a year. So let's say you do a small change every quarter, and then the next quarter you change something small, and the next quarter you change something small, and the next quarter. You will change 4 things over the course of 12 months. Now that can create an immense change in the grand scheme of things. But let's say you say, no, I'm going to change 4 things in 12 months. So I'm going to work on all those 4 things for 12 months. Your focus, even just moving from one to the other, it takes time. You've got to undo what you were doing here, and then you got to refocus here. All that takes time. All it takes effort. It takes brain power. It's just your focus just can't be the same. If you're going to spend an hour every single day focusing on one thing for 12 weeks versus an hour every day focusing on 4 different things in that same time period, you're going to get overwhelmed with those 4 things. You're going to be, I just can't do this anymore. And what happens is you give up. And so you wind up with no success. Because sometimes you quit after a few weeks, sometimes you quit after a couple of months, but it's just too much and it just doesn't work. But if you change a small thing for a certain period of time, a different thing for a next period of time, you can focus on that thing very significantly and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so, yeah, the tiny, tiny changes are simple, and tiny changes don't take as much effort. The focus is easier, and the length of time to change something is shortened when you get right down to it. So what are the components to habit change? So first, you need to determine what your values and beliefs are based on truth. Truth is really important because you can be led astray by something you believe that actually is not true. I can give you loads of examples just from a biblical standpoint. Adam didn't eat an apple. Adam ate a fruit. We don't know what the fruit was. It was an apple, but people say it's an apple. And there are actually people in the world that will not eat apples specifically because Adam ate an apple. But that's not true. Apples are very valuable to you. They're very healthy things for you. They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That they're pretty important to be in your diet. And yet there are people who, because Adam ate an apple, which really wasn't, it was a fruit, they won't eat apples. No, that's not going to kill them. I get that. But nonetheless, they're led astray to some degree. So that's just a biblical example. But there are all kinds of things. I mean, even today, the things that are being said about different things, it's leading people in all kinds of directions and polarizing, even in households. It's not a good thing unless it's based on truth. My thoughts. So you determine your own values and beliefs based on truth. Then you ascertain whether your present habits are actually supporting your values and beliefs. And if they're not, then you need to explore some options. What do you need to change? What do you need to get rid of? What do you need to add to your routine or to your habits or to your sequence of events? Is the whole sequence just a mess and doesn't work, or is there only a component in that sequence forming those habits? Is there just one area that needs to be changed or gotten rid of that is of no value anymore? And then choose something to change, something small, and work on it. In the meantime, set yourself up with a support system. Just being accountable can make a big difference. Maybe it's you want to change your health, so you hire a personal trainer, and that personal trainer checks in with you all the time and says, "Hey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing?" Just knowing that somebody's going to ask you that question sometimes is enough to cue you in and say, "Well, I better do that. Yeah, I better do it again. I better do it again." So get yourself a support system of some kind, whether it be like a coach, well, like me, or as I say, a personal trainer or a close friend that can tell you off when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Then you have to evaluate that change after a time. So you need to set a time limit on this, how long you're going to spend on this change. Then evaluate it. Is it working? Has it made a difference? If it hasn't, change it. You've got your options again. Look at new options. If it's working and you've had success, celebrate. And then just do the process as many times as you need to do it. And honestly, this is a journey, folks. This is not a means to an end. This is a journey because things are always different every day. The way you feel every day is different. The way you respond to things every day is different. The way you feel, everything is different every single day. You may even have days that you think are the same, but there's something different in that day. Sometimes you have to look for it. Sometimes it's more subtle. And that's why some people have gratitude journals and that sort of thing, because they need to look for those things. That's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons. But habit change can be simple, not necessarily easy, but simple. And we can simplify that habit change by following those that sort of sequence, or that that habit by following the components. So you know what? Here's to a more stable and integrity-filled, authentic life. Thanks.